Oh boy, we have a lot to unpack here. There's a big update happening to death mechanics in Old School Runescape tomorrow, or should I say today, as this video is going up. And there's a lot to talk about. I'm sure there's a bunch of other YouTubers going over the whole update in general, but I want to actually focus on the UIM aspect of it, because I've played UIM for over 4,000 hours, and I feel like at this point, I'm able to make a pretty good assessment of the pros and cons of these changes. Let's start from the very beginning. I think all of you know how death in RuneScape worked in actual 2007, as well as when Old School first came out in February 2013. If you died, all your items would be on the ground for 2 minutes, and if you didn't make it back by then, they'd be gone. Other players could loot your items as well, meaning it wasn't as risky if you brought a friend with you to fight bosses. However, there was a big issue in Old School. Some malicious players would DDoS other players while they were bossing, meaning kick them off their internet. And that way they could pick up those players' items, and because of that, Jagex started making changes over the years, as you can see on screen. These are all the death mechanic changes over the years in Old School RuneScape, with the end result being that no other players will ever see your items when you die outside of PvP, which was made that way presumably because of DDoSing. And the final change made to death mechanics was May 22nd, 2015, where items will appear on the ground for 60 minutes only visible to you, and after that they just despawn. And this is how it's been for over 5 years, until today. Now when you die outside of PvP, you'll keep your 3 most valuable items on you, and the rest of them will be dropped at a Gravestone, and you can claim the items from the Gravestone from up to 7 tiles away. You'll see it marked on the world map, and these Gravestones last for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, they get sent to Death's office. Before this change, this timer would be going down whether or not you were logged in. After this change though, even though it's only 15 minutes now, the timer will only go down if you're logged in. And also if you become inactive, which I assume means if you're idle, so if you DC, the game presumably will know that and the timer won't start going down until you actually do something. Previously, your items would only be on the world that you died on, but now your gravestone will appear on every single world. So for example, if your computer crashes, you won't have to scramble to find the world that you were on before. And now gravestones will remain there even after world reboots, like for example after the Thursday game updates. So there's actually risk to dying now. When you die, you have to pay to get your items back from the gravestone. And that scales based on the value of the item, as you can see right here. And don't worry if you're risking billions of GP in gear like a T-bow for example, the cap to the fee of any individual item is 100,000 GP at the very most. So you're not going to have to actually spend like a billion GP to get your max gear back if you do happen to die with it. And if you ever want to see the hypothetical fee of dying based on the items that you have in your inventory, you can check the items kept on death interface, and this thing has legit been broken since Old School came out, so it's nice that they finally got this thing working properly. Note that Ironman will get a 50% discount on retrieving their items. And also, no one has to bring GP with them to the gravestone. The fee can be taken directly out of the bank. You can also sacrifice individual items worth over 10k each to death and get 105% of their GE value to be put towards retrieving items. Now there's a lot of specific rules on a lot of different items, like things that are charged, broken, pouches, etc., which you could check out in the news post, or you can pause here and squint real hard and look for the items that you're curious about and see what happens to them on death. But in a bit, I'm only going to be going over the items that have a big effect on the UIM game mode. If you don't make it back to your gravestone in time and your items end up going over to Death's office, you're going to be paying 5% of the GE value of those items that are being held there. But realistically, if you're a max player with max gear and you've been playing the game for such a long time at that point, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to get back to anywhere in the game within 15 minutes. So Death's office should really only be a thing for low to mid-level players, and if you're really a low-level player and you have items under 100k GP, you'll get them back for free. I don't want to go any more in-depth with how the general death mechanics work, but if you want to read more specifics, I'll link this news post, a Mod Ash tweet, and any other relevant links in the description. But let's start getting into Ultimate Ironman now and how this affects the game mode. I was originally thinking maybe I can just take a couple minutes in the progress video to talk about this, but there's way too much to talk about and I figured this would warrant a separate video. So, everything I've told you up to this point has no effect on Ultimate Ironman. Even after this update, when a UIM dies, their items will remain on the ground for 60 minutes in the same world, and that timer will continue to count down even while logged off. Now here's the first very big thing I want to point out. Before, when you died on UIM, your untradables would stay in your inventory. Now all untradables, including the seed box, rune pouch, etc., will be on the ground where you died. One reason why this is so big right here is because this pretty much unlocks the wilderness for Ultimate Ironman. Once you start getting to like maybe the mid-game stage, you'll have a rune pouch, seed box, maybe an Ava's assembler, and some other things on you as well that are untradable. And before, when you died, those would stay in your inventory. So if you want to go to deep wildy, such as doing your Mage Arena 2 capes, or getting a Dragon Pickaxe from Chaos Elemental, you'd be risking those items on you because they would always be lost over 20 wildy. But now these will stay on the ground for 1 hour along with all your other items. So for example, if I want to go back into the wildy to go for the Chaos Elemental pet, I won't have to unimbue my Ring of Suffering, I won't have to take all the charges out, I can just die at like the Edgeville Nettles, for example, and it'll stay on the ground for an hour, along with all the other items that I mentioned. I could go out to the wildy, kill the Chaos Elemental for 45 minutes, come back, pick up my items, die again, and head straight back out. While it is true that you can die at Hespori or Vorkath, for example, and your items are held there, which is still going to be the case, if you die anywhere else in the game that's not a safe death, like Pest Control or the Fight Caves, those items will be gone forever, just completely deleted. So you couldn't just keep your untradables there, go into the wildy and die, because then all your untradables and all your other items that you had there would be gone. So from now on, the wilderness doesn't have to be off limits necessarily. There's pretty much no risk anymore for UIM. You get a hard clue step in the wildy, go suicide your items, no untradables on you, go out with your spade, get your clue done, and get your rune items and be disappointed. You can see here I have 2 death piles on the ground. This isn't changing. Each death pile starts with a 1 hour timer, and you could die anywhere else in the game, whether it's the PvP or PvM. You can do whatever you want, and each death pile will still be ticking down starting from their original 1 hour death timer on the world that you died on. And the reason I have my items in 2 piles here is simply because I can't fit all of it in my inventory. So when I'm doing stuff in the wilderness, I make sure to come back here every 45 minutes, pick up each pile, and die again with that pile to start a new 1 hour timer. What Jagex is saying here is that they understand UIM is different, very different in fact, and they don't want to change the core mechanic of the game mode. And I'll get more into this in a bit, but this isn't the first time UIMs have been excluded from new updates. For example, UIMs can't use the Seed Vault, which when people hear that they say, oh, that sucks, man, but in reality, that's a very good thing because that would completely devalue farming and Herblore, which is arguably the most difficult skill to train on UIM, and just make it way easier. UIMs can also not use the Spice Rack in the POH, and another thing you may find interesting is that a while back they updated PvP to where you can use looting bags in PvP worlds. UIMs were excluded from this update. On PvP worlds, UIMs can only put items in the looting bag while they're in the wilderness. I'm sure there's quite a few more examples of new updates that UIMs have been excluded from, but those are just a few of them. Now, the next very big thing is that in instance areas without a retrieval feature, such as Skatizo, maybe quests like Dream Mentor, or if you open up a Kraken instance, any instance like that where you could lose your items if you die in there, that is now safe. Your items will appear outside that instance on the ground. Not as a gravestone, but just on the ground with their 1 hour death timer. When you die in an instance on a UIM, or if you have your stuff in Hespori and you die somewhere else in the game, or any situation where you lose all or almost all of your items on a UIM, that's called wiping. Because as a UIM, obviously you can't just store all your items in the bank, so when stuff like that happens, you lose everything. And there have been very high level UIMs in the past that have wiped at instances, like for example right here at Skatizo. Something else you may not have known is that UIMs have never saved 3 items on death. In the past you would keep your untradables, but not anymore. No more untradables, and you still will not keep 3 items on death, and the protect item prayer does not work for UIMs. So this means no more wiping in instances. Realistically, the only way you die to Skatizo or Kraken would be because of a DC, and especially if it's Jagex's servers, that's not really a fair reason to lose all of your items. Like I said before, death storages such as Zora, Hespori, Vorkath, Those aren't going away. The only thing that is changing though is Zora. If you're not an Ultimate Ironman, once you get 50 KC, then you'll be charged when you die there. If you are a UIM, you can still die there as much as you want, even beyond 50 KC, and there won't be a fee. The only difference is that Zora is the only death storage place that doesn't actually have an interface where you can pick and choose your items. There's a very specific order based on top to bottom, left to right, inventory, rune pouch, looting bag. That's not an order, by the way. And the last change I want to talk about related to death mechanics, specifically for UIM, is that from now on, I know it says just for regular accounts here, but this applies to UIM as well. If you die inside of the God Wars boss room, your grave, or in this case for UIMs, your items will appear outside of the God Wars room. I guess I should explain looting bags for those of you that don't know. So you can put 28 items in a looting bag, but you have to be in the wilderness to put items in. And UIMs use this game mechanic to hold on to more items. So you go one step into the wildy, put them in, and then leave the wildy. However, to get items out of the looting bag is not so simple. The only ways to get the items out is at a bank, which UIMs can't do, or you can die with it. And when you die with the looting bag, it's lost on death, and then all the items inside the looting bag are put into the 1 hour death pile. Or the third way is by destroying the looting bag. When you destroy it, you need to be in the wilderness, otherwise everything inside the bag is deleted. And when you destroy it in the wilderness, all the items pop up on the ground available for everyone to see immediately, and then they disappear after 60 seconds. It's very risky to do that, and if you're at my stage in the account and you have a full looting bag as well as half an inventory of items, you wouldn't even have space to pick up like half your looting bag items anyways, so that's probably just something you do very, very early on a new UIM. Knowing that info about the looting bag is crucial to understanding why this God Wars change is so big. In the past, if you died at God Wars on a UIM, you'd essentially have 2 inventories of items on the ground, meaning you'd have to make it back twice in 60 minutes if you died. And that could be an issue because in order to get into the boss room, you have to get 40 kills of the respective god's minions outside the room first. That wouldn't be an issue for Zami or Bandos because 40 kill count for them is so fast, but with Sarah and Arma, that's an issue because kill count takes a while, and most UIMs wouldn't want to risk their untradables to get an ecumenical key, as well as being down an inventory slot by having to hold on to it. If you died in the past, you'd have to get God Wars items of the respective boss, get food, maybe get the Faldor shield. Untradables stayed on you, so you could use the blowpipe to get kill count, but even if you're efficient, you probably wouldn't get into the room until at least 20 minutes into the timer. You managed to eat a bunch of food while tanking the boss and tanking all 3 minions and picking up your items at the same time. You teleport out just in time, and now you have to get a looting bag. Looting bags are a much more common drop nowadays, only 1 out of 4 from red spiders, but back in the day, it was all 1 out of 30 from thugs, and if you went 100 plus dry to get your bag back, then there was no guarantee you'd make it back in time. What you could do in that situation though is make a separate death pile at the Edgeville Nettles with that first inventory, and then worry about getting the looting bag back after you retrieve the rest of your items. And I can't imagine the stress if you DC'd and you were running low on time and you could only make 1 trip back, and you had to pick and choose which items you knew you wanted and which ones you knew were about to get deleted, all while panic eating and taking damage. Point I'm trying to make is that a God Wars death on a UIM was a big deal and could cost you half your items, if not potentially all of them. And with this update now, that whole scenario is gone. Items will appear outside the God Wars boss room door for UIM and all other accounts too. And now it's only a mild inconvenience to come back twice to pick up your items. This is somewhat controversial within the UIM community. Generally, newer UIMs are happy about changes like these, and people who have played longer don't necessarily like them, which is generally what happens with any update to UIM that's considered a big change. But anyone who's been playing UIM for like at least maybe a year will agree with this and has experienced it firsthand, that UIM always gets easier and devalued over time, and that's just something that you learn to accept as time goes on playing this game mode. So I'll give you both sides of the argument that I thought of, and there's fair points to both, and I don't believe anything is black and white, but here we go. If you're a high-level UIM and you're doing God Wars, you have a plan written out, and I guarantee you know what you're doing if you're at that point in an Ultimate Ironman. And you could always make it back twice within an hour without much stress. However, this goes back to what I was saying before. The only way you wouldn't be able to make it back to God Wars twice would be if your internet went out for like half an hour or something, and that wouldn't be a fair reason to lose thousands of hours of progress. And yeah, I know you can hop on mobile, but after all that I explained before, it may not be that simple navigating around God Wars and tanking plus eating in the God Wars room as you pick and choose the items that you want to pick up. So would it really be fair to lose your items due to something out of your control? Like, realistically, if you're at that point in the UIM, Sarah's not a hard boss, it's very easy. DCing is an unavoidable and unfixable part of the hardcore Ironman game mode. However, this is almost like a way to fix DCs for UIM. Alright, now on the other hand, if you don't like this update, here's the argument for that. Besides the obvious fact that it devalues the achievements that people have already completed, it also gets rid of the risk factor. After this update, there's really not going to be any risky boss for UIM. Maybe DKs, but that's still a stretch. When you make a UIM, you know it's meant to be a challenge, but this removes arguably one of very few PVM challenges and risks for UIM. But the game mode is still very, very challenging, and there's so much more to it than just God Wars. And the beautiful thing about UIM is that there's really no right or wrong answer to the methods that you do, and the order that you do things, and the goals that you set for yourself, and what you personally want to achieve out of this game mode. That's why I love Ultimate Ironman. Now, before we wrap up, I want to ask two rhetorical questions. And these are the two questions I always find myself asking when there's a new update that affects UIM. And you can relate these to any variety of controversial topics in the Ultimate Ironman game mode, such as looting bags, death storages, death mechanics, noted potions, etc. 1, if this is changed now, will it alter the core of the game mode? And 2, should it have always been that way? So just something to think about. I don't know if there really is any right or wrong answer, but either way, everything I laid out is what's happening. These death mechanics were only supposed to be a temporary solution 5 years ago, and now we finally got at least a somewhat more permanent solution, which I'm sure will get updated as time goes on. These are the death mechanics the people voted for, so this is what we got. And I am recording this the day before the update actually comes into the game, so hopefully there's not going to be some kind of like rollback or some kind of issue when the update comes in, because stuff like that does tend to happen, but I guess by the time this video goes up, we'll already know what happened. If you have any questions about Ultimate Ironman, even if it's not regarding death mechanics, I'll try to respond in the comments. Now, if you want to hear what I think about this, my personal opinion on UIM death mechanics is